Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Kelly Driscoll. In this episode, you'll hear part 2 of my conversation with Sharron Huang, recent graduate of Stony Brook University, where she received a BA in Linguistics, an MA in Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, and an MS in Speech-Language Pathology. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. You did an extraordinary job sharing the clinical experiences that I think, would be so relevant in them making decisions about who is going to kind of go to the next level, beyond just viewing the resumes. Who are they going to make initial contact to? Who is going to make it to the, various rounds of interviews that I'm sure happen? Who becomes in that final list of candidates to consider? So, and alongside all of these clinical experiences you had, something that we don't always see in these kinds of professional portfolios is that you had a section where you were including recommendation letters. So people have a chance, to get some kind of boots on the ground information about what it was like working with you too from other people before they even, maybe invite you in for an interview. What was it like for you to kind of contact people that you were interested in including a recommendation on your portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you do go to my Digication, for all the listeners, like I have quite a number of recommendation letters. I don't have anything to hide. I'm happy to share them. So like I said before, like I've got quite a amount of involvement throughout my time at Stony Brook. So I was able to be very close with my academic professors and whatnot. So like they were happy to write me a letter of recommendation, especially in such a close-knit cohort and program as Stony Brook's speech language pathology masters. Like we were quite a tight, quite small cohort of just 29 students. I was also on the leadership board for our cohort as well, so that helped definitely get me very close with a lot of our professors, as I would always often go to like office hours, or I'd stay behind and help out as a student assistant too. So luckily I was able to get really close with them, and they were happy to write me a letter of recommendation as well. So they were of course happy to do it, and with it being a relatively new program as well, they were like, our success is their success. And that I think is also why I chose to come back to Stony Brook, because I had other choices. I was thinking about like whether or not I wanted to stay back in the city, because I had already moved back to Brooklyn. And I considered staying in the city and I did apply to other speech programs within the city, but I knew that like I personally had Dr. Favis, who's the head of the program. I had taken her classes as a pre-speech track student in the summers and in the winters. So being able to like have that personal experience with her, and then I know how much she's invested into the program and invested in our success. I knew she would be happy to write a letter of recommendation, especially with how involved I was with the program and how she really would love us to see us succeed. So academic recommendations, they were all super fantastic. The externship recommendations were actually my clinical professor's idea. She highly encouraged all of us to ask for one immediately towards the end of our externship. So that way we weren't asking for a recommendation from someone we hadn't seen in a year.
No, while you're fresh in their minds.
Yeah, exactly. So luckily I've had amazing, wonderful externship experiences. I had my very first one at the United Cerebral Palsy, and that was really my first experience working with the medically complex community, especially amongst student populations. And that is actually very similar to where I work in now, when I work with students who have special needs, and having that exposure genuinely is, I believe, like, is why I've got the position that I have now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she was happy to write me a letter of recommendation. I worked in an outpatient private practice, and that was super great. Like, being able to collect these experiences and look back so fondly, I'm very lucky to be able to do that. And then my last externship was in the New York City DOE, and that was actually a very last minute opportunity where I was almost assigned to a school district on Long Island, but my clinical professor knew that I wanted to come back home for us, and she knew that the DOE was always the goal for me. So she very, very nicely and graciously pulled some strings and had our contract early so that I was able to do it, because she was going to have it done for the following cohort, just based off of like the timing and everything. And naturally, with the program being on Long Island, there aren't too many people from the city who come to make the trek out there for their graduate program, since we do have many graduate programs for speech pathology in the city. But she was very kind to have that work out for me. So I had my externship recommendations there, and then of course with my many extracurriculars, I had a great support staff, many support staffs, where I reached out to my current staff at that time, and the people who I hadn't talked to like 2-3 years, who I know they had written a letter of recommendation for me a while ago, but I asked them because like I see them every now and then at RA events or campus residents, like networking or career day, like being able to still have that connection with them, even though I hadn't worked with them or directly under them for like 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Like the fact that we had such a memorable time and that we were still on great terms, like the fact that they were willing to write me a letter of recommendation, I'm greatly appreciative. And
Yeah.
then
You've clearly
yeah.
made very strong connections.
Yeah, like
And
being and
yeah.
they were so detailed too. Like they would write in different examples and stories, and like wow, like being able to have such a like being able to see what they thought about me too, and to have it written out in paper was so reassuring. And like I'm like, oh, like I know I had an amazing time like working with you, but to hear all these like wonderful words that you're saying about me, just uh, I feel elated. And
Yeah.
then my last category, I guess, of letters of recommendation was summarizing my teaching experiences, because I had not only done my long-term subbing out in the city, I had also done a maternity leave replacement as well on Long Island. So I was able to get a mix of both. And um I had also volunteered during the pandemic to do a program, um and where we were reading to a lot of the parents' kids who were involved in the Stony Brook community. Because imagine like being back home in the middle of the pandemic with your kid, and you're constantly with your kid. Like naturally, these parents need a break. They don't. I'm sure like they're petrified with what's happening in the world right now. And then hey, like all my classes are remote anyway. So and I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back in subbing with all the schools closed. So that was genuinely like such a great way to use my time in such a meaningful, impactful way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's extraordinary. So I was curious. So you mentioned you were you spent about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years, working on the ePortfolio as part of. It sounds like there were three different classes. So did you start in one and then it kind of carried
Yeah.
through the
Yeah.
other three? What was the professor's name? I'm sorry if I missed that
Yeah.
earlier.
Alyssa Bell Chang.
Okay. So it sounds like she gave some great advice.
Oh yeah, and then she actually showed us some of the digications from the previous cohort too. So she showed examples of like what you could possibly do with this, and it definitely got the wheels turning, of course.
Uh-huh.
So it was nice to like see what my peers were doing, and like take some of like their great work and how they were displaying it, and different features and gadgets to use. Um while also like figuring out my own style. How do I want to present it? What kind of like I have extra teaching experience. I went to the ASHA convention. I really wanted to highlight that because that was specifically related to the field. But a lot of the my peers and I had a lot of similar tabs and whatnot too, because like we have the same classes. We had 3 externships. We should have a contact information, and my professor was really great in that she had a rubric for us too, so that we started off with requiring a certain amount of things our first assignment, so that way it was like a slow build to it
Mm-hmm.
instead of
Mm-hmm.
just having all these expectations done immediately overnight. So it was nice to like always be like, oh, like I have some spare time. Let me just add a little something to my education now so that it doesn't build up over time. So yeah.
Yeah, often when we're working with students that are part of these kind of professional practice programs, there are kind of big expectations for what it may look like at the end of the program. And I know very often instructors and those that are kind of thinking about what what the requirements might be, or what kind of the grading expectations may be in designing some of these rubrics. How much structure do they want to give the students to start, or how much do they just want the students to be able to kind of take the reins and have ownership over how it's organized and what content is going to go in it, how much mentorship is going to be involved, how often are they going to be able to see peers' portfolios as they're being developed. And it sounds like there was some natural sharing that was happening between your cohort. Was that something that was kind of built into time that you had in class, or did you find that you guys were just kind of doing that on your free time? Did the professor encourage you to share with each other? What was that process like?
Yeah, a mix of all of that. I remember in the classes, she would have dedicated time for us to work on our education portfolio, for us to talk to our neighbors, for us to ask her any questions in the moment if we had any. So she definitely built into that time to create our education portfolio within the class time, so that we were around different inspiration, or like
Mm-hmm.
have her be able to quickly look at our website to see if there are any things that she wanted to add, or like, oh, should I make my headshot over here? Should I put it over here? Should I not have it at all? Those are like quick questions for her to answer too.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you got some guidance too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you might have gotten some guidance because you were part of these kind of clinicals and you also had these teaching experiences that you wanted to share. But there's always, privacy kinds of guidelines and how much is shared. Did she give you some kind of coaching on best practices there too?
Yeah, definitely. So we had our rubric, and it was straightforward, but it definitely left a lot of room for creative
Mm-hmm.
decisions and whatnot. So she listed that she wanted work from every single class, and your resume, of course, and your cover letter. You weren't required to put down any extracurriculars, because some might not have, some students might just simply not have any.
Mm-hmm.
um but for the information that we put, I know in a lot of our academic work, we have our peers' names, or our students' names, or our clients' names. um So she made sure to tell us to make them unidentifiable. So either like client XXX, or client initials, or just the client first name. That way there was no violation of HIPAA. There's no FERPA violation as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know like in like some of my favorite tabs to make, especially in Digication, were the ones about my externship experiences and my teaching experiences. And they do look very similar in terms of format. So I would put the picture of the school, but make sure there aren't any students in there. But
Mm-hmm.
she encouraged us to put pictures of our students or any thank you notes that we had. So I included that, but I'd made sure to put little like emoji smiley
Yeah,
faces
you've got
over
your yes,
over every
emojis.
single little kid's face so that they were unidentifiable. And then you can see like just me um
Mhm.
without, which I think is kind of funny for some of my pictures because quite I'm the size of my middle school student. Uh
But it's great because we get a window into the environment, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that was the whole purpose. Like I wanted for which whoever the employer was or the hiring committee to almost be able to picture me at their school. Like you can see that I'm comfortable in this school environment, all these different school environments. You see that I'm having a great time with these kids, like be able to work with these kids. Um, like I want them to envision me in their school and be comfortable choosing me and enthusiastic to choose me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just think about those words in comparison to the kind of bullet point about the experience that would be on your resume and how different that is,
Yeah, this like
right?
paints the whole picture of my experience. Like I always find that I have a harder time cutting down on words than filling it. So I'm just like, well, I did this and this and this. I'm like, oh, what about this project? It's hard to cut down all these like amazing things that we've accomplished. Um, so like to be able to talk about them more through the Digication website was more exciting than ever. Like I was able to put down explicitly like, what we did, what curriculum we used, how many kids I
Mhm.
had, and how often I saw them. Like the fact that it was during COVID, like being able
Yeah.
to talk about what struggles we worked on, like how difficult was it teaching through a mask and a plastic shield. So
Mhm.
really allowed me to speak on my experience.
And that kind of naturally brought me to my next question. I love it when there's these beautiful little segues because my next question was if, has it always been easy for you to be able to talk about yourself and your experiences, or do you feel like that's something that's kind of grown over time, or maybe it was in working with this professor, or maybe in some of your leadership roles that this started to come out for you? Because some people have a really difficult time talking about themselves, and you definitely seem very comfortable with it now, and you definitely seem like you're very comfortable with it through all the information that you've shared in your portfolio. But that has that always been the case?
Yeah, so definitely did not come out of nowhere overnight. So I would say that it started um a little bit in high school where I I went to a high school where I didn't have many friends coming in from middle school, and I know I had to push myself to make new friends and make new connections from the start. However, I think it really began and like continued to push where I am now. My sophomore year of college actually, and I think it lines up very nicely where because my freshman year I was a bio major on the pre-med track, not enjoying my classes, having a really tough time studying and not going out, but at the very end of freshman year getting the RA position, the resident assistant position, where I was all of a sudden like sprung into this leadership position that I really hoped and prayed for. Um, because then at that I was a leadership role model here. I'm like being able to have a reason, have a why to push myself to not only enjoy college life and like living away from home and dorming, but now I also have to kind of market this and sell this and invite other first year students to feel welcome on campus as well. So having them come out to events and showing them different resources and different spaces that we had, um, and hosting these spaces and being able to explain like, oh, like this is what we're doing and this is what we have planned for today, and like I have free pizza, like you want to come here and like come out at night at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday. So like being able to have a reason, have a why that pushes me to be comfortable in my skin, be confident and like sharing not only about by myself but about Stony Brook. And I feel like that's also what allowed me to learn so much about the school and now have so much pride about the school too.
Yes. Well, you definitely exude that, and I can imagine that, the comfort that you have in sharing who you are and your experiences probably really resonates with the students that you work with now also. So it's wonderful that you had that RA experience on campus. And I think this kind of storytelling and highlighting your achievements through your portfolio is reinforced that and has this kind of additional audience around who you are and what you do. And I think, this kind of celebration of who you are and your experiences and your passion for speech and working with students probably really inspires all of the people that you work with, the students and the colleagues that you have at your school today.
Thank
And I
you.
was curious. Yeah, I was curious. So, as a recent graduate, I, what are some of the connections that you've already fostered as an alumni, or what are some of the relationships or connections that you hope to keep now that you've graduated from the university?
Absolutely. So, um, I know luckily Stony Brook is only a 2 hour train ride away. Uh, Happy to hear about that. I know I'm definitely on their alumni list. I like to know when homecomings are and whatnot. But also I stay very close in contact with a lot of my friends who are still there. Also fellow alums from the college as well. I would say my biggest like contribution still to this day is being part of a program called SL Peers. So our speech language pathology is usually an SLP, and we have a program that we made with peers that comes with it, and it's a mentor mentee program. So I luckily still have a mentee in the program. And so it's really great still seeing where they are now in their academic journey, having to give them advice and talking about their experiences and their externships and rooting them on, because just a year ago I was in their exact same
You were
shoes.
right
So
there. Yes.
yeah, so like I know I talk to them at least once every 2 weeks, being able to share oh you got this, oh where did you get placed for your externship this year? Oh how'd your test go? Or what are some places that you're looking to apply to for your CF post grad, and any advice that I can give? Or we have our licensing exam, which is the praxis, and I know a lot of them are studying for that then, and being able to share
Yeah.
that material with them, it's nice to pass down all this information. And because I didn't come in with this empty handed either. I had a wonderful mentor too, who shared her fountain of wisdom with me too. So being able to pass that along feels like you're part of something so much more. And then, uh, of course, still being very involved. I love being part of the admissions committee too, as well as I guess now as an alumni interviewer, but I was a student interviewer during the time, and now they send invitations out to the alumni to see if they'd like to be part of the admissions committee board. So that's
Yeah.
something that I look forward
Well,
to
that's
taking
great.
part in, and continuing my involvement in the program and at Stony Brook.
Oh, that is wonderful. And I'm sure that you'll be an inspiration to our listeners as well, and anyone that comes to see your extraordinary portfolio.
Thank you
I
so
so
much.
appreciate you. Yes, I so appreciate you taking the time to join me and talk about your extraordinary achievements and all that you've done, and really looking forward to sharing your story with our listeners. Thank you so
Thank you.
much,
I'm so
Sharon.
flattered. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Take good care.
Thank you. You as well.
This concludes our conversation. To hear our next episode, be sure to subscribe to Digication Scholars Conversations on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. The Digication Scholars Conversations series is brought to you by Digication. a technology platform powering the most innovative ePortfolio programs in K-12 and higher education. Our website can be found at digication.com. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks for tuning in.